Welcome to Coco's Connection, the podcast where we deep dive into inspiring stories, real conversations, and the connections that shape our lives. I'm your host, Coco, and each week we'll explore the people, ideas, and experiences that help us grow and connect in meaningful ways. Thanks for tuning in, and let's get connected.
Hey guys, welcome to Coco's Connection podcast. This is episode 3. This theme is called Mindful, Demure Connections, Building Relationships Through Presence. And I'm going to first start out with one of my favorite scriptures is from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 8 says, "Love never fails." And I'm going to read a story. It's called The Garden Bench, and it really, I really enjoyed it because I want you guys to listen to it and let me know if this ties in to what we're kind of saying the theme is today. Since Maya had always lived a busy life, between managing her career, keeping up with friends, and attending to endless tasks, she somehow become disconnected from the quiet moments she once cherished. Each day felt like a blur, moving from one thing to the next, and even though she loved her work, something inside her was missing. She felt detached from herself, even when surrounded by people. So one Saturday afternoon, Maya decided to visit a small local park she hadn't been to in years. She needed space to think, time to slow down, away from the hustle. She found a weathered wooden bench, nestled by the side of a peaceful garden. The sun was warm, and there was a gentle breeze carrying the scent of jasmine and lavender. She sat down, closed her eyes for a moment, and let herself breathe deeply, finally giving herself permission to just be. As she sat there, a small voice interrupted her thoughts. "Is this seat taken?" A man's voice, warm and kind, but hesitant. Maya opened her eyes and saw an older man standing by the bench, a weathered yet gentle smile on his face. His gray hair was tousled by the breeze, and his hands were clasped together in front of him, as though asking permission to sit. "No, go ahead," Maya said with a smile, shifting slightly to give him more space. The man sat down beside her. They sat in silence for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts. The air was still, except for the occasional rustling of leaves in the trees above. Finally, the man spoke again. "I come here every Saturday," he said, his voice soft but steady. "My wife loved this place. She'd sit here day after day and watching the flowers bloom." Maya turned and looked at him. Her curiosity piqued. She could sense a deep tenderness in his words. "Do you still come here because of her?" she asked gently. The man smiled, a sad yet peaceful smile. "Yes. You see, she passed away 2 years ago. But when I sit here, I can still feel her. I can hear her laugh in the wind, and sometimes I swear I see her sitting right beside me." Maya felt a lump in her throat as she listened. There's something so incredibly raw and beautiful in his words. He wasn't just remembering his wife, he was honoring her in a way that transcended time. "She loved this bench," he continued, his voice becoming a little softer. "We used to sit here and talk about everything, life, the future, our children. Sometimes we didn't even need words. Just being here together was enough. That was love. I think just being." Maya looked out at the garden, now seeing it in a new light. The flowers, the birds, the breeze, all seemed to hold a deeper meaning now. There was a connection in this space, not just between the man and his wife, but between all the people who had ever sat on this bench, finding quiet solace together. The man stood up for a moment. He seemed lost in thought, his gaze resting on the flowers that surrounded the bench. "I think," he said, as if to himself, "love is more than just the big moments. It's the little ones, the quiet ones, the moments when you're just there with the person you care about, doing nothing but just being." Maya's heart softened, and a wave of emotion swept over her. She hadn't realized how much she'd been longing for something like that, just to be present, to share space without expectations or distractions. "I think you're right," she said quietly. With that, the man smiled at her warmly, and with a nod, he turned to walk away. His gentle hands tucked in his coat pocket, Maya stayed on the bench for a while, the man's words lingering in her mind. She thought about the people in her life, the moments that truly mattered. It wasn't about a grand gesture or busy moments. It was just about showing up, being fully there for each other in the quiet, unspoken parts of life. As the sun began to set, Maya smiled to herself, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She didn't need to have all the answers. She just needed to be present, to connect, to love, and to allow love to flow in the small, everyday moments. She stood up, walked slowly through the garden, and whispered to herself, "I think I'll come again here next Saturday." So, listening to that story, it reminds me of those mindful, demure connections and building relationships through presence. She didn't have to do much. She literally sat there, and it was time for her to really just be present in that moment and to have those meaningful connections. I believe that the importance of having those connections are being in the present, because sometimes, we hear presence and that you're physically there, and sometimes we're not physically there. But even if you're on the phone conversation, or online or FaceTime or whatever, you're really engaging, and that's the whole point of connection, is to truly be there for someone mentally and emotionally, and it's about offering our full attention and understanding, and it also helps us deepen our connections with one another. Sometimes we can get so used to scrolling so fast, or swipe into the next thing, that we truly lose those connections. And being present and having your presence be known, it fosters mutual respect in that relationship, whether it's friendship, whether it's relational as far as like husband and wife, and even with your children, whatever they're going through. Even with, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. We have to really listen to those around us and understand their pain and understand what they may be feeling. And I think a lot of times we try to brush it off because it's like, oh, be tough or be strong. And that's great to be strong and persevere. But truly being vulnerable allows us to truly connect. And I'm going to give you 4 mindful practices just to cultivate that presence. The first thing, again, is active listening. When somebody is speaking to us, we just got to focus solely on their words. We got to just avoid our phones and try not to formulate a response. And that's hard sometimes, because you want to, like, I'm going to give you an answer. And sometimes they just need to be heard. And I just think about those times in your life where you're not looking for an answer. You just want to be heard. You just want to have someone listen to your pain, you know? And it's not about what we're saying. It's really just about, are we listening? And then, you know, it really helps our relationships deepen. And people appreciate the fact that there's no judgment. There's no interruptions, or there's no, like, I'm going to tell you how to do this and it's going to work. And so that's the whole art of active listening. And I think we have really lost that in our generation, as far as like active listening and being better at that. For myself, I will say for myself, I'm being more mindful. These are mindful techniques, and you keep those in the forefront of your mind, because it's like, I'm just gonna, this is an example, like, I can tell one of my friends, I'm frustrated because of this, and I just need someone to understand. And it's like just talking above them and saying, no, well, you need to do this, or you need to do XYZ. And they're like, I wasn't looking for XYZ. I know that I need to do XYZ, but I just need you to listen and just let me vent. And sometimes really need that, just to have that shoulder to lean on. And then the second thing, you know, just for mindful practices to cultivate present, is just mindful breathing. Sometimes it's taking that deep breath when you're frustrated, and even before engaging in a conversation that could be stressful. You know, there's times, you know, to build those relationships, and you're in a heated argument. It could be with a spouse, it could be with a person, you know, with your kids, or it could be with a parent, you know. Just remember, we have to be mindful of how we're responding, because it's 10% of what the other person says, but it's 90% of how we respond. And if you are in a heated heated argument with, say for instance, your kid, you're screaming at them and they're like, ah, and you're wondering why they're not listening to you. It's because they've shut that down and they're not listening to you. So then we can enhance our relationships just by you know, taking a deep breath. Even if you breathe together sometimes, or just walk away and breathe, and just take that time to take a step back. That's what the whole purpose of the breathing is just to take a step back and say, let me reevaluate. Am I active listening? Am I, you know, I'm holding off on what my prejudgment is. I am having the mind of Christ, and because the Word of God says, be slow to speak and swift to hear. So we must be slow to speak and swift to hear. And that goes in with empathetic presence. And how do we practice that? It's sharing something that's personal, emotional, that you can connect with. But it's not always like, oh, I had this situation too. It could be, I understand. And that's all you have to say. It doesn't even have to say, you don't have to say, well, I had this situation happen as well. And, you know, being empathetic just means that you're there for them emotionally. It's not always, you know, telling them, well, this is what you need to do, and just jumping and giving them to the advice. It's saying, you know, I can only imagine how hard this must be for you. This sounds really tough. Those are the examples. Even if you say, you know, this sounds really hard for you, and I can't imagine how hard this was that you went through this. And those types of things connect you in a deeper way because they know that you're listening. They know that you are there for them. And that's the biggest thing that has encouraged me to be more mindful of my relationships. And it's allowed me to even grow closer to my spouse, of not just always saying, well, you should have done this or you should have done that. And even with my daughter, it's saying, I know you're upset and I really apologize for that, but there are times that we have to go, or and that's the difference between gentle parenting and passive parenting that I'm learning. And this is building that connection with her in a parent-child relationship. And those are mindful connections where validating their feelings, but also setting those boundaries, and how those relationships can be there, And the last one is just mindful, like how your body language is, and not just like, oh, like I'm so mad about it, or how you respond to them with the uncross your arms and facing them and looking. Sometimes it's so awkward to look people in the eye nowadays, and I could say that sometimes it is, but I think too it really allows you to connect even with your spouse, even if it's your spouse. Be more mindful and demure. You have to truly, in order for you to truly connect, sometimes you can just sit there, and that's what the story, the garden bench story was saying. You didn't have to say much. You didn't have to say a lot at all, but just sitting there and then being in that. Sometimes we have to be in that uncomfortableness where you're looking them right in the eye and you're saying, okay, I am going to connect with you. And you don't have to have these fancy dates or whatever we see on social media to connect. It's just, you could have dinner and they make dinner, or your spouse makes dinner, or you make dinner, and you're just sitting there, phones off, or even just, sitting on the couch and talking to one another and really engaging. Because I think too, a lot of times, and you don't even have to talk, like they were saying, it's just more so sometimes just being makes a whole difference. It really does. And so navigating through that's the type of, how we were saying, those are the types of examples of making sure that we are being present. These are practical ways that you can do that. Being grateful, having that gratitude of saying, hey, I really appreciate how you listened to me today. Or even just sending a quick text and saying, thank you so much for being there for me. So many times those build relationships because it encourages others to not be so judgmental and being able to open up to one another. And just not having that non-judgmental awareness as well is saying, good or bad, I'm there for you. Because you gotta think God's grace is there for us when we're not perfect, and no one is ever perfect. And we can say, oh, I got it all together, but it's only by His grace that we even have our minds together, because with everything going on in this world is craziness. But having that mindful and demure connection, even with our Heavenly Father, allows us to be open and honest to Him. So if we're open and honest to Him, we got to be open and honest to one another. And I think we get so much judgment in this society, but He's the one that takes our sins away, and He gives us more love and more grace than the world does. So I think the biggest thing, we're going to talk about the impact of a demure approach in modern relationships. And, social media and fast-paced life often interferes with our ability to connect meaningfully. And that's what I was saying previously, of how the world often values boldness and extroverts, and how a demure approach can sometimes lead to genuine and deeper, more genuine bonds. It's not necessarily so we have to be bold, and it's good to be bold, and it's good to be extroverted, but when we're mindful and truly having those connections, and it's a deeper level than just a surface friendship or a surface level interaction. And when we allow those gentle approaches to life and relationships, it encourages us to go deeper. And I do want to encourage you to try out these mindful techniques, and just to let you guys know, like, being present and demure in your approach to building relationship doesn't mean we hold back from being ourselves. It just means we slow down and listen deeply and connect with others in a more intentional and mindful way. And that's the key, is being more intentional and more mindful. And I want to encourage you guys, like, let me know, email me, put in the comment sections what techniques really stuck out to you, because and what you're going to be more intentional with this week. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share your thoughts with me on social media. I'd love to hear about your own experiences with mindful connections. And I just want to thank you again for joining me on Coco's Connection, episode 3. I hope today's discussion helped you explore the power of presence and the impact of a demure, mindful approach to relationships. Until next time, stay present, stay focused, and stay connected. Love you all.